We were hit by a 20-millimeter fire from Focke-Wulf 190s. It caught fire, and all our systems were shot out. Nothing worked.
Yeah, that's definitely a 24 with the tail like that and the bubble gunner.
The co-pilot got up and went out the upper hatch, and as a pilot or co-pilot leaves, it's time for this boy to go.
So he goes to the top hatch, and he said right when he popped his head out of the hatch, those planes were roughly 200 miles per hour, it slapped him against the back. So he had to press himself and try to get out. As he got out, he grabbed the top gun that swung him around and basically lifted him up out of the hatch, and so now he's holding on to the turret. There he is.
There he is.
And he's on top of the aircraft, right next to the engine, and he's thinking in his mind, his prop planes, do I jump out and risk being cut by the prop, or do I jump back? Which he was looking at was the two tails. These 24s had the two tails and the bubble gunner.
Well, actually, right here is a hatch, and that hatch is for when you ditch, that you can climb out to get out before the plane sinks. But when I came out of there, the guns were in the elevated position. I just grabbed hold of the gun, and when I did, it swung me around parallel with the fuselage. And I was just hanging there, and as I said, you could imagine my head being right up next to the guns, these engines going like crazy. And then I looked behind me, and that big old double tail back there, and I didn't know whether to let go or what to do. And I was out of the plane, and meanwhile I was starting to get a little warm because the whole interior was burning.
So as he's debating this, the bombs explode, and the plane blows up, and it knocks him unconscious.
The Battle of Gotha was won by the 2nd Division during the week of the 8th Air Force's blitz on Germany's aircraft factories in February of 1944. For more than 2.5 hours, the liberators of the 2nd Division fought their way through a hell of bullets, shells, and bombs. Desperately, the German fighters, nearly 150 of them, tried to halt the task force. They called on every trick, raking the liberators with machine gun and cannon fire, diving to within 50 yards of the formation in suicidal attacks, even air-to-air bombs in their attempts to break up the formation. The bombs went down right on the target, flattened nearly every building of the powerful Gotha Wagenfabrik plant, producer of 1/3 of Germany's twin-engine aircraft. The Nazis lost 76 planes that day. One B-24 group lost 13, another 7. Losses were high, but Gotha, monument to the courage, persistence, and tenacity of the purpose of the 2nd Division's men, never recovered.
He would talk about accounts of moving through the Netherlands, and so then when I got assigned here, I always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to retrace his steps. So I was actually talking to a colleague in the embassy when Jos overheard, and it piqued his interest, and this was a 1.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of been building this ever since, and we got all the pieces in order, particularly for the north, where we were going to start, in Hardenberg, where he landed, and then the south sort of unfolded in the same manner. But we got to go up to the north to the exact patch of grass where he crash landed. The plane landed in Balder. He landed in a family farm in Hardenberg. And then from there, we retraced the journey. By far, the thing that stood out to me most and that I will take with me is being able to relive those stories in the places where they occurred. So the #1 place for me that stands out and that will always be in my memory is being able to stand in the place where he landed after his plane exploded, and he utilized his emergency parachute, bailout parachute, to get to the ground safely. Far and above, that will be the memory that I carry with me.
When I came to, I was falling, reaching for ripcord, and opened my chute, and the concussion had started my nose bleeding, and I didn't know whether I was actually hit, hurt, or what have you, but I had blood all up my face and into my helmet and so forth. A whole group of people were running toward me, so without thinking, I pulled my .45 and threw a round in the chamber, and as they came forward, they kept yelling, "Hollander," Well, that's easy enough to figure out what they meant, that they were from Holland. So I motioned them forward, and one of them asked me if I was blessed, and I didn't quite understand what he meant by that. And so I got my language card out, and I did see something on there about religion. So I answered him by saying, "Ik ben Protestant." And so I guess he thought I was crazy, and I thought he was, so we had mutual understanding. So then they asked me to follow him up to a farmhouse where they gave me a sandwich and some tea.
Looking at his handwriting and thinking how similar it is to my grandmother's. She used to write me notes from Santa every Christmas, and they look just like this. Kind of wish he had written more. You know, it's a small glimpse into his mindset at the time. The pictures are pretty incredible. I'm actually thinking how similar he looks to my sister. His facial features and everything. Because there's not a lot of pictures from that time, period.
Yeah.
You know, so you don't get to see images of, at least my generation, a lot of the grandparents, there were not a lot of photographs at this age. You know, he's 19 here. He has the same smile, though. If you look at his smile here, and then you watch some of his videos, and when he laughs, no change. And then there's always the thought, you know, because he just recently passed, how incredible it would have been for him to see this again. It probably would have just brought back a rush of memories.
At that point, a member of the Home Guard in German uniform with a rifle came in and informed me that for me the war was over. Favorite expression of theirs. So he says, "Come." We started out. We came to some sort of civilian camp, and he said, "In here," and the people were following us, and they said, "No, don't go in there." So I just stopped and said, "No, I'm an American soldier. I want to be turned over to the military." And he said, "Well, I was trying to save you some time because, you know, you're hurt bad." And I said, "Well, I still prefer the military." He says, "Well, let's go." So we walked down the road a little further, and the people behind kept saying, "Run to the woods, run to the woods." But they had no large trees there. What I could see would just look like bushes. And so we came to a crossroad, and they were yelling, "Go to the woods" again. And so I just stopped. And now at this point, I didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, some youngster come up and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come," and he took off. And I just, without thinking, took off behind him. Then I remembered the guy with the gun, and I turned to look, see what he was about to do, and saw the crowd had him and were beating the daylights out of him. So they took me to these woods, uncovered a trapdoor, and put me into a hole in the ground, which was more or less like a cave, and it had bedding in it and so forth. And they brought me food, and I stayed there for, I guess 4 or 5 days until the heat got off from the Germans looking for me. Then we walked to a church. I hid there for a while, and finally they made contact with the underground, and they sent a vehicle to pick me up and take me into Amsterdam. I was in Amsterdam 4.5 months, or 4 months, while they were waiting to try to find a safe route.
It was actually Ton Bonds, who was one of the resistance members in this area, that was one of the few that could speak English, and ultimately set him on the course to end up at the Pajama House. But this gentleman here is actually the grandson of Mr. Paulin, who helped my uncle. He told a story to us that his grandfather had buried the parachute and boots of my uncle because they didn't want the Germans to find them. And when he was a kid, he found them accidentally, dug them up, and would play with them.
Okay.
They since have deteriorated and gone away, but hearing him tell that story was pretty cool.
Okay.
I got as far as Antwerp. We crossed the border into Belgium, and at Antwerp I was turned over to I guess he was just a member of the underground. He was supposed to be to take me to France, and instead he was a collaborator. And he explained to me that he had all kinds of connections and where he was going to take me. Don't worry about the Germans in uniform because they'd been bribed and this, that, and the other. We walked into the place, and once we walked into the building, you could see that it was all over. They knew him, and they just turned us in.
You know, I have no doubt, had he had the chance to see these things, the flush and rush of memories. But the other thing I'm thinking about is very excited to continue to put this story together and give it to the next closest person, which is his daughter, who I have a relationship, who is close with my father. So I think she'll find this, you know, because she's going to look at this and say, this is my dad's handwriting when he was 19. On February 23rd, while on a mission to Gotha, our plane exploded over Holland. The co-pilot was the first man out, and he was machine gunned by fighters. I was the last man out, and although I was captured by an officer, I managed to escape with the help of the Dutch people. Now that the invasion has started, I hope to get back soon enough to do my share. My thanks to all who have helped me. Clement Leone.